This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to downrigger@montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thanks a lot, Manny. And as Manny just said, I am Downrigger Dale with the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Thanks so much for joining in. Want to thank all of you for continuing to share the podcast. That means a lot to us and helps us out a lot. So hit the old share button wherever you're at and let her rip. Also, want to give a special welcome to our active military listeners around the world. Just love the fact and very honored that you share your time with us from wherever you are. I've just loved getting your emails, and I'm glad that we're bringing a little bit of home back to you as you protect us overseas, and thank you for your service. So today, I want to continue on with what we've been talking about as far as, getting out of your comfort zone a little bit, going over to different waterways, fishing for different species. Montana has just so much to offer, and so often we get into our comfort zone, and you go, well, I don't know if I want to go out and try to learn a new reservoir or new stream or whatever, but you're missing out because there's so much to do. But of course, it's always a good idea to get a little extra information and kind of know what you're doing. But before we get into all that, I wanted you to know that in Montana, discover a land where adventure roams free. Explore small towns where every corner tells a story and every greeting comes with a smile. Saddle up for breathtaking horseback rides or catch a fish in a crystal clear lake. Spend your evening sharing stories around a campfire under a starlit sky. That's how you Montana. Plan your trip at visitmt.com. That's visitmt.com. Today, I wanted to do something a little different and talk to an expert here, Dr. Christopher Guy. Well, he has got quite the resume here. He is the assistant leader of the Montana Cooperative Fishery Unit, affiliate professor of the Montana State University. Among many other things, Dr. Guy also is one of the creators of the Fishes of Montana app. Now, I don't know if you guys have taken a look at this thing. I got to admit, I did not know about it. Now, maybe that's just I'm behind the times. Technology is not one of my huge strong points, but I did download the app and really enjoy it. So we're going to talk a bit about the Fishes of Montana app, which is really interesting. In fact, I think you guys are going to have some fun with that. But I want to welcome Dr. Guy to the program. Chris, thanks so much for joining us today.
You bet. I'm glad to be here.
Let's talk a little bit before we get into all the great stuff we're going to cover. I want folks to be able to get to know you a little better before we go. So tell us a bit about yourself and where you're from, how you got to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so, excuse me, I was born in Iowa, and I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, so go Chiefs. And
there you go.
I got an undergraduate degree in fish and wildlife management at University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. And then I went to the great state of South Dakota, go Jackrabbits, and got my master's and PhD at South Dakota State University. And then I started as the assistant unit leader at the Kansas Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit in 1994. And then I moved to Montana and have been working here since 2002 at the Montana Cooperative Fishery Research Unit, which is part of the U.S. Geological Survey. It's a long story why USGS folks are in universities, but it's a wonderful program that's been around since the 1930s. I've been teaching and conducting research on fish populations, if you guys do the math, for a little over 30 years, and been teaching fishery science and communication and ecological sciences. And most of my work is advising master's and PhD students that are going to go work for natural resource agencies that are responsible for managing these wonderful resources that we all love to enjoy.
Okay. Yeah, I have a lot of fisheries biologists from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks on this podcast, and they're just a huge wealth of information. What were the main influences that got you into the field of study and teaching what you do?
Well, it's pretty simple. I grew up fishing and hunting, and just the love of outdoors. And I wasn't the best student in high school, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I kind of stumbled upon this wonderful degree that you could get in fish and wildlife management and science. And I said, well, I like to fish and hunt. Let me give that a try. And what's kind of interesting is the more I was doing my master's and PhD, the more I fell in love also with the science, right? Doing the science, asking complex questions about fish populations, and then being able to go and try and answer those questions, which I really fell in love with. And so that then spawned me to just kind of, no pun intended there, but to be in academia and share that love of science and the outdoors with other students.
Okay, yeah, kind of a similar story for me. I was never a great student in high school, but when I got into college, I found my passion, and I shocked myself. I graduated with honors. I never thought that would happen, But when
we
you find
see that a
lot.
Yeah, we see that a lot, which is, I think, I don't know what it is about high school. It's probably all the other dynamics and the cliques and all that kind of stuff. And once you get to college, everything gets reset, right? Everything gets reset. Excuse me. And you can, so there isn't that. And then you can find your passion and kind of drill down on that. So,
yeah, I think my big distraction was cowgirls. That kind of got me distracted for quite a while there. But it really, I don't know. Just when you find something you're passionate about, and that's what I love. What I do now, and talking to people that love to hunt and fish, is they're so passionate about it. Now it sounds like from your education and all that, you probably could have went to any college around. What brought you to Montana State University?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting in that. I told you earlier, I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. And so when I got the job at Kansas State University, which is in Manhattan, Kansas, it's only a couple hours west of Kansas City, Missouri. So we were close to family, all the relatives and everything. And I had always kind of wanted this job at Montana State, and the person retired, and then there was a lateral, and then there's vacancy came up. And I'm like, we should go. The kids were at the right age that we could move. And really it was the adventure of coming to Montana, and then also the diversity of fishes and fisheries issues in Montana, which from the science side and the question side, there's a lot of different questions and a lot of different issues to tackle in Montana. And so that I found that very challenging. So that's what brought us here, was the adventure. Montana's a really cool place, and we see that now. A lot of people are fall on some of us that came a while back, but and the fisheries are just really, really cool. Yeah.
They're just really. I don't think there's any place like it. Of course, I'm a bit biased. I was born and raised here, but then I lived all over the country, well, actually all over the world. Boy, as soon as I had the chance, I came right back here because it was I just grew up hunting and fishing and loved it so much. Now, one of the things that we've been doing lately, and you probably heard me when I was talking at the beginning of the show here, but here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast is trying to encourage fishermen to get out of their comfort zone and get out and fish in new waterways and learn about new species, go after new species and that. And that brought me to talk about the importance of knowing what you're catching, especially when you get into a new waterway and that. All of a sudden identifying fish goes, wait a minute, I don't think I've seen that thing before, or do I have what I think I have in that? So that's when I was doing a little show research and I came across the Fishes of Montana app, which, as I was saying, is really a cool app. So I thought, well, let's talk to somebody that got involved in that. So can you talk a bit about the Fishes of Montana app and how it came to be and how you created this? Yeah.
So it started with several of us thinking about redoing, the Fishes of Montana book. I don't know if you've seen that or not. That was published in 1971.
Yeah,
and
I've seen that.
And it was by C.J.D. Brown, who was a professor at Montana State University, famous gentleman. And it needed to be updated because obviously fish species distributions had changed since that book was published. Names of fishes have changed, the scientific names. Our profession is really good at changing the scientific names. And
yeah.
And so we have students taking our ichthyology class that are using this book, and it's dated, and we needed to update that. And then we got to thinking, well, the names of fishes change, every few years. The species distribution maps change as we get more information. What about making something that's a little more real time, that can be updated easier than publishing a hardbound book? And then that's when, let's make it an app and then make it available to students that are taking ichthyology class here at Montana State, but all the anglers that come to Montana can benefit from this as well. And so that's where we went with it. We went with this app, and really the content that's in that app, you can drill down and to the detail that you would get in an ichthyology class, or it's at a broad scale to where somebody just wants to know where a fish lives in Montana. You can do that. So that's what's really cool about the app, and it's free. And we just updated it, as a matter of fact, because a bunch of names, scientific names, Latin names, had changed on fish species, and we just need to keep it updated. So we made some changes. We'd found some errors in the previous version, and then the person that does the back end of it and the programming then just pushes a new update to out to the iOS or Android devices, and there it is. And so super cool.
Yeah, it really is. And what's fun about it, is if you just take some time, you can noodle around through it and learn all kinds of things. And I guarantee you, folks, you're going to learn stuff that you had no idea existed out there. And in fact, when you found this podcast, whether you found it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever, or on our website, MontanaOutdoor.com, go down to the bottom of the podcast description. You're going to see it'll be highlighted links, and on that, I'll put a link to this so you can get more information on it and that, and then just download it, and now you got it with you, and I think you'll find it. But let's talk a little bit about some of the practical uses. For example, let's say I hear this podcast, and now I'm out fishing. I catch a fish. I go, what in the hell is that? How would I use this app to identify the fish?
Yeah, probably the easiest thing is when you open up the app, there's a splash page, and then it'll go to a page that has different icons on it, like browse fish favorites. And if you hit that, you can just browse through the fish species, but you're going to want to go search by characteristics. And if you click on that, you can pick the location of the state you're in, and it'll filter the fish that are only in that part of the state. And then it'll ask you about its dorsal fin. Then it might ask you about its caudal fin and adipose fin and things like that. So you're looking at that fish and you're clicking on these things.
Yeah.
And then it's going to take you to the fish species that have that. And eventually you're going to get to your fish. So it's really super user friendly. We don't have a bunch of, jargon in there that only ichthyologists use. We tried to keep all that out to make sure that anybody could pick up this app and use it. And, it's not any good if people don't, can't use it, don't understand it. So, super, I think simple. And if folks, find it difficult, let us know. We make changes. We'll make the changes.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I noticed in looking through it is, you guys are encouraging that, hey, tell us what else we can do and that. So now the app is, of course, not just designed to, identify the fish that you're catching, but it also helps the FWP. Talk a bit about that as far as some of the things that the app can do that help you as scientists and also just the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks folks out there.
Yeah, and excuse me, I think you've probably seen on some social media feeds from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks right now about catching pallid sturgeon. Pallid sturgeon numbers are increasing above Fort Peck Dam, and that's a function of the number of fish that have been stocked, and they're starting to get to sizes that anglers are catching them. It's an endangered species, so if you catch it, let it go as soon as you can. And what's cool about the app is if you go to pallid sturgeon and scroll down to the bottom in the description, it'll tell you similar species, and it'll say shovel nose, and it'll tell you the difference between a pallid and a shovel nose. So that's one benefit. So you can quickly go and see, this species that I caught, geez, did I catch an endangered species? You don't want that. So it can tell you that pretty darn quick. And there's also species in there that aren't currently in Montana. They'd be non-native or invasive species that are nearby that we do not want in the state. Snakehead's an example, and we do have that in the list. And the reason we put those in is if somebody catches one, they think it's a snakehead, we want to know immediately so we could have some kind of action to remove that species, because we know from in the invasive species research that's out there, the sooner you can get on those species and try and eradicate them, the better off you're going to be. So that's why those are in there, is to get that message out. We don't want these in the state. If you catch one, let us know. Let FWP know.
And I imagine even in certain areas where, you catch a fish that isn't even supposed to be in that area, it may be in Montana. I was recently did some podcasts with some biologists up in the western Montana. And for example, walleye is a really popular fish in, sport fish in Montana. A lot of fun, but we've had some bucket biologists that decide, okay, let's put those in western Montana. And a walleye can do some serious damage to a fishery up there. It's just a whole different world.
Exactly.
And so I would imagine that can help fishermen when they say, I never knew this was in here. I wonder if it shouldn't be. Now, would that be something the app could help them, let them know that, okay, that's probably not in there?
Yep. Especially if they went to an area, that it says this fish isn't in, and you're like, I just identified this and and I caught this fish in an area it says it isn't in. Yeah, you bet. Mm-hmm. You could figure that out from the app.
Now, will that give in the app, does it give information of who to contact or whatever, or just get a hold of the FWP?
That it does not. No. So you would then go to, whatever region you're in the state, the headquarters for FWP there, and contact them.
Yeah. And that's the best way to go. One thing about the FWP that I found is they're very helpful. So if you call like you say, the closest region to where you're at and say, hey, I found this thing, because, we're seeing that. And I had always thought that, that was from way back when, folks didn't know and they were kind of just doing things on their own. But in talking to some of the biologists around the state, that's still going on. People are still moving fish around. Sometimes, it's accident. They don't realize that using certain things for bait that you're not supposed to use in certain areas can certainly introduce them. But, there's just some people that decide they know better, and it really can cause some serious problems. And so it helps out a lot. Like I was just talking with some folks that love to fish down the Bitterroot River, and they're finding smallmouth bass in there. Well, people go, oh, smallies, they're fun. That ain't going to hurt anything. Well, yeah, actually, they're an aggressive fish that in the Bitterroot, they don't mix well. And they're concerned about that big time now.
It is unfortunate that goes on, and we could have a whole podcast.
Yeah, we could.
Discussion about that, because obviously I have a lot of opinions, and I work closely with the Lake Trout Suppression Program in Yellowstone Lake. We do all the population modeling for the Lake Trout Suppression Program and work closely with the National Park Service. But I think what folks need to grasp is the amount of money that then goes in to try and remove species, and that money is, where does that money come from? A lot of times it comes from all kinds of different resources, but that's money that we can't use other places. So people need to realize that moving fish and putting them in different systems causes an ecological disaster that is almost impossible to eradicate that species. And then we're stuck in a continual suppression program, which costs a lot of money. I just wish people would, instead of moving fish, just go fish somewhere else where they are. We have lots of opportunity to catch walleye, smallmouth bass, trout all over the state. Might take you a little bit farther and cost a little bit more in gas money, but that's far outweighs moving a fish to your favorite lake.
Right. And thus, part of the reason of why I started this series on this podcast was, not just to get out and see different parts of Montana, but also for that reason is, when you learn that you can find, think about a species, if using this Fishes of Montana app or whatever, you can find where that species is at and then go do it. It'll be plentiful, it'll be managed, and you're really going to have a lot better time fishing for it. So now, how is the app working so far? Let's see. Was it 2019 you got the app underway, or when did it start?
Yeah. So let's see. I think that's about right. And I just asked for some stats, knowing this interview was coming up, and we have 10,000 downloads. Most of it's from the U.S., but we are represented in 18 countries in Europe, 13 countries in Asia, 7 countries in Africa, and 6 in Latin America. So it does get around the world, but most of it's U.S., which you would expect, and probably that was mostly made up of Montana. And of course, Apple devices are about twice what the Android devices are, but it works great on both. And again, it's free. We don't have any ads or anything like that. And that's a shout out to Patagonia, helped pay for the development of the app.
Great.
We got a grant from them to get it started and then to go. And if I can, I'd like to have a shout out to a couple other people that helped out. These folks were very instrumental. Whitney Tilt, Katie Gibson, Al Zale, David Schmetterling, and Zach Shattuck that's the team that really kept this thing going and got it going. And then we've had a lot of help from biologists and students that are doing the quality control of the app, just making sure, looking for typos and misdescriptions and things like that. A lot of information in there.
Yeah, it really is. And it goes way beyond just identifying fish. There's just a lot of things you can use, and it's another great thing to have in your fisherman's toolbox, if you will, to get out there and do that. And you talk about, well, it's you see that it's downloaded in different countries and all that, and I've noticed the same thing. Like with this podcast, when we started this, we do a statewide live radio show called the Montana Outdoor Radio Show every Saturday morning from 6 to 8, and that's on 30 radio stations around Montana, and then we put it up on Facebook Live, and it just kept growing from there. And now, I mean, it's unbelievable how many people that we started the podcast so we could go more into a deeper dive into certain subjects. And I had no idea how popular this thing would get. And the only reason I think that it is I think the further you get away from Montana, the more mystical and magical it becomes. And so, now this podcast is regular listeners in now almost 100 countries. It's now in the top 25% of podcasts in the nation, which I just had no idea that it would go
That's
that
awesome.
way.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's just great. But what I love about it is then we start getting a lot of really great questions, and I think it really helps folks that are going to come to Montana be a little more prepared and have a little bit better idea. And again, this is great for someone that's coming to Montana to download that, because that's where you are going to run across some fish species maybe you've never seen before, and that can help them a lot.
A lot of people come here to trout fish, and they might catch a bull trout. And if you catch a bull trout, we want to get that back as soon as we can and not stress that fish out. And, being able to know what that looks like compared to another species is just, we think it's just very useful. And again, I know I touched on this, but it's very accessible and user friendly. These fishes of, almost every state has a fishes of, and they're typically written by pure ichthyologists, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's how we learn about fishes and all that kind of stuff. But it just is so full of jargon that people just can't relate to it. And we think the Fishes of Montana app bridges that. We still have some of that information in there that the ichthyologist is interested in, and also what the angler's interested in.
Well, Chris, we're going to take a short break here. And when we come back, I want you to talk about some of the other projects, because you do a lot more than just the Fishes of Montana app. And I want you to talk a bit about some of the other projects that you're involved in and that. So we'll cover that right after this. I mentioned it before, and I'll say it again. It means a great deal to everyone that works on this podcast to have so many of you listening each week. Thank you all so very much. Another huge thank you needs to also go out to my friends at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Without their support, we simply would not have a podcast. Just like us, you can depend on Superior Hardwoods of Montana, especially when you're ready to turn the place you live into your home. Now, what do I mean? Well, the place you live is not really your home until it reflects who you are. One of the best ways to do that is to go see my friends at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. For example, they have some incredible antique redwood reclaimed from a Marcus Daly water plume built back in 1917, running from Georgetown Lake to the Phillipsburg mines. They have many other reclaimed options to choose from, as well as like corral board, antique oak, granary lumber, barn siding that is beautifully aged from natural weathering. That could be perfect for your home's soffit, siding, or paneling on an accent wall. They also have antiqued hand-hewn beams and saw-cut timbers that in a way is a tribute to our American history and to your home. Superior Hardwoods is also the place to find the perfect wood to create the ultimate outdoor space, like that incredible deck you've always wanted. Yeah, Superior Hardwoods of Montana is for sure your decking headquarters. Not only do they have a variety of exotic hardwood decking options, but they also have domestic classic traditional cedar. And the best part of that is they are offering exclusive pricing on gorgeous high-quality cedar decking right now. there are lots of benefits to cedar decking. It is resistant to temperature and weather conditions. It won't warp due to moisture. It is rot resistant and requires less maintenance than other softwoods. Go see them on the web at superior-hardwoods.com or stop by their showroom in Missoula and let them guide you through the woods. Remember, on the web it's superior-hardwoods.com. Oh, you're going to love what they do to your home. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, and my guest is Dr. Chris Guy. He is a professor at the University of Montana, plus does, well, all kinds of things. In fact, that's what we're going to talk about next, is all the other things that you're involved in helping our waterways and fish across the state of Montana. Of course, we've talked a lot about the Fishes of Montana app, which, again, I can't encourage you folks enough to download that, use it, have some fun with it. What other things are you involved in, Chris, as far as your research and other things that you're doing?
Yeah, before I go on that, I'm from Montana State University, not University of Montana.
Oh no, did I say that? Yeah, oh my God, I'm sorry. Montana State University, yes.
That's okay. We have a little bit of a rivalry between the two.
Oh, we sure do. We sure do. And I do this podcast from Missoula, home of the Grizzlies, so pardon me. Yes. But I have kids that have gone to Montana State. So, yeah, I always have to bite my tongue a little bit there. But, yeah, in fact, it's interesting how the two universities really kind of have different personalities. Mm-hmm. And I find that Montana State tends to deal with, no offense, U of M, but they tend to deal with more practical matters that we come across. I did not go to either one. I really get ribbed here in this town because I graduated from Eastern Washington University.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Eagles. Yeah, so anyway, So talk a bit about what you do at Montana State University as far as the other things that you're involved in, both at the university and outside of the university.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, my job is pretty specific in terms of focusing on graduate student education, so students that are looking to get their master's degree or PhD. And so it's a really research-focused position. And I spend a lot of time, as I said earlier, on the lake trout suppression program in Yellowstone Lake and helping understand the biology and ecology of lake trout and cutthroat trout that are using that system, and also to help guide the suppression efforts. That's a huge effort. I don't know if your listeners are know what's going on out there, but it's a several $1 million a year suppression program, and we're really starting to see the benefits of that. Last year, I got to do a pack trip into the thoroughfare, which is the southern part of Yellowstone Lake there in the upper Yellowstone River. And it's just amazing to see the, 20-inch cutthroat trout that are swimming up there to spawn. And it's just really coming back. And talking to the outfitters back there, they said that it's never been better. I mean, there were years just back in 2010 that they weren't even outfitting back there because there were no fish. And now, so it's really cool to see that program and the effects of the suppression program benefiting cutthroat trout. So there's that. I also spend a lot of time in the Missouri River above Fort Peck Reservoir working on pallid sturgeon, endangered species, and trying to understand what's the factors that are influencing why they don't recruit, and how can we maintain that population given how the rivers are managed. And I've actually worked on pallid sturgeon all throughout the Missouri River Basin. But I've worked on everything from bull trout in Glacier National Park to burbot to mountain whitefish in the Madison River. Just finishing up a project on Georgetown Lake. FWP was interested in wanting to know if the Girard strain of rainbow trout that they were stocking was eating kokanee. And come to find out, they're not eating kokanee. It's one of the few examples of where the Girard strain isn't eating kokanee.
Really?
Yep. Huh. So I work on, everything from endangered species to very classic type of fish management projects. So it's been a wonderful career. And I got to tell you that the students that I've been blessed to advise and even today, and maybe even more so today, just the talent of students and their dedication to the profession and wise use and conservation, of fishes is just, it's amazing. And sometimes you hear people kind of dog on biologists, not just in Montana, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, but all over. And it's just like, you don't know what these kids and adults have went through to get these jobs, the training, and they're not doing it for the money, they're doing it for the passion of the natural resource. And so just the talent of students is really amazing, and I'm just the future's bright in terms of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I rely a lot on fisheries biologists to get information for this program, and in fact have them on there, because I think they're just a great resource of why things get managed the way they do and that. And I think sometimes fishermen have like you were saying, have the wrong perception of what a fisheries biologist does. And so often what I found is some of them think, well, they are managing the reservoir or lake or river the way they want to see it. And that's not it at all. It goes, one to, what it was, I guess, depending on your beliefs, the way the good Lord designed it to work, and trying to keep it going that way and that. And so to me, I think the more people understand it, they will realize that these folks are on your side big time as a fisherman. It really benefits when we all work together. And what I've also found is once fishermen get to know the biologists, there is a great relationship that can happen there, because the more information the biologist gets, is I was just talking with the new fisheries biologist for Canyon Ferry, and he brought up a great point. He said a lot of these fishermen spend more time out on Canyon Ferry than I do, and so the information they can bring to me is very important and helps a lot. So that's one of the things we've been trying to push really hard, both here and on the radio show, is when you hear about public comment, they mean it. They want to hear the public comment, because that's how we make all this work. So I'm glad that you brought that up. We're going to take
I'll just add that keep in mind that most of the folks that get into this profession are in it because they love to fish and hunt. And so they have the same passion as the folks that now they're trying to better the resource for. So I think it just has to be some communication early on, and people will find out that there's more common than they have differences.
Well, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, speaking of that, I would assume that you are a fisherman. And so we're going to talk a bit about a fisheries biologist expert and what he likes to fish for and where he likes to go. So we'll talk about that when we come back right after this. Hey, gang, thanks for supporting and listening to this podcast. I can't tell you how much it means to all of us that you're here. And speaking of support, we would not be able to do this podcast at all if it weren't for sponsors like Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. It is truly an honor to have Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer on our team. If you own a trailer, you ought to think about adding them to your team too. They can service your trailer, and when it comes to repairing trailers, well, you won't find anyone better at it than Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. If it's parts you need to do your own service and repairs, well, they are the place for that. Another thing you may not know about Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer is they install all kinds of accessories for the truck that pulls your trailer. Whether it's just the necessary items to help your truck get the trailer down the road perfectly, or all those gadgets and bells and whistles to dress your truck up a bit and, well, make it your unique style. And Here's the best part. The folks that do all those repairs and installations are real technicians. They do things the right way and do it to such a degree of precision and reliability that you can roll down the road with confidence. Whether you need your trailer bearings packed, the whole thing rewired, or the right fifth wheel, or any kind of hitch installed, you're going to know that your trailer is ready to haul what you want worry-free. No matter if it's getting you and your four-legged coworker to the next rodeo or job, or just hauling a load to the dump, or getting the boat and RV to your favorite fishing hole, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer has you covered. And of course, if you need a new trailer, they can set you up with a brand new Diamond C gooseneck equipment, dump trailer, or whatever else you need to haul wherever you are going worry-free, happy, and looking good, too. Heck, they even carry an amazing line of CM truck beds that'll make your rig look and work like new. It's what they do at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They're in Missoula, or you can find them on the web at rmtte.com. That's rmtte.com. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Go see them. Talking with Dr. Christopher Guy. He is with Montana State University, also does a lot of work for, as he was just talking about, whether it be over in Yellowstone Park or that. And when you are, take off your biologist hat and your professor hat and all that and say, I'm just going to go out fishing, what do you like to fish for? What's your favorite fish to go after?
Well, it's kind of funny because I'm in Bozeman, Montana, but I would much rather fish for crappie than anything.
Really?
Yeah, okay. I grew up fishing for crappie. I did
Missouri,
my PhD
right?
on crappie, and so I just love that fish. And man, are they good eating, right? I think
they are. They are
the best up there with walleye. Part of the problem with me and fishing, especially fly fishing, is I don't quite have the patience for it. And I'll be fishing a hole, for example, on the Gallatin, and I'm not getting anything. And I know there's 100 fish in that pool right there.
Yeah.
And if I used electrofishing gear or I snorkeled in there, I would see 100 fish.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't have the skill. And then, somebody that's skilled will catch fish out of that same hole. And so I start to lose confidence and patience. So I'm not the best fly angler. I wish I was, and I keep trying, and someday maybe I'll get better, especially maybe after I retire and I forgot how many fish were in those pools.
Yeah.
But I really I do like walleye fishing. I love crappie fishing. Those are some of my favorite species to go for. I do like to fish for consumption. That's that's kind of one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, that's I am a walleye addict. Admitted it. I go to the meetings. Have not been able to shake it. I absolutely love fishing for them. And I'm with you. Fly fishing always fascinating. My grandfather was one that taught me to fish, and he taught me fly fishing, and I do enjoy it. But it's one of those things when you get out on the other side and you run around Fort Peck, which, we're so blessed to have that fishery. I mean, there's just so much in there. It's incredible. So, yeah. And then the other one that I've really gotten hooked on lately is the going after the big king salmon on Fort Peck. And that is just the ball. We call it blackjaw fever. When that hits you and you haul in a 20-pound king salmon on Fort Peck, then you're ruined for life. Then you just got to get another one. You got to catch another one, and they're not easy to find. But so going out and getting out and having some fish and enjoying life in Montana as a biologist and a teacher. You've seen a lot of different species and studied a lot of different ones. What would you say is probably the most interesting species of fish in Montana? The one that fascinates you the most? Yeah,
and this is probably part of my where I grew up also, but the blue sucker is a species in the Missouri River, and they are fascinating, and for a couple reasons. One, we don't know a lot about them. They show up as these big, what we think are adults. We don't know anything other than we catch some big blue suckers. Where are all the juveniles? We have some thoughts that even those big blue suckers that are in the upper Missouri River, they may be 80, 100 years old, some of those fish.
Really?
Yeah. And so they're just long-lived, fascinating species, and they are just so hydrodynamic. They are just designed for turbid, fast-flowing rivers. And I'll remember the ichthyologist from Kansas. He told me a story about catching a blue sucker, and he was in this river, and he was up to about his thighs, and he could barely stand. And he released that blue sucker between his legs, and it just sat there, not even moving. So they're so hydrodynamic, it takes no effort for them to move around in those currents. And they're just a fascinating species, and they're kind of blue, the steely blue, kind of just really cool species. So that's probably my favorite, just because it's kind of mysterious as well. What are they doing?
Yeah. I've never caught one before, but I'll have to study up on those a little bit more. Well, one of the species that I talked about recently, I was talking with the fisheries biologist for, the Thompson chain of lakes. And in Horseshoe Lake, they've got tiger muskie in there, which there's not many places in Montana that you can find tiger muskie in. And I thought, well, wow, that would be really neat to go catch a tiger muskie. And he basically said, good luck. It is so hard. And he said, that lake is so clear. You can see him. You can see him right there. And he cannot, he's constantly trying. He get those fish to take a lure or anything. Now, why would that be? What do you suppose that is? That, obviously they eat a lot. They couldn't get that big without eating a lot. But what?
I don't know the answer to that, other than they're just super weary, for lack of a better term, of anything that just doesn't even come natural. And I know a lot of muskie anglers, friends of mine that are muskie anglers. And they'll come back from a fishing trip where they've spent thousands of dollars on a fishing trip, and they got, probably $5,000 of lures. And they'll come back and they'll say, the trip was awesome. We had 3 follows.
We had 3 follows.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
And it's something about, I think it's the muskie gene or something in there. That's just because we know northern pike will, they're way more aggressive, or dare I say, not quite as smart as the muskie, maybe. But
exactly. I remember up in Alaska, I was way up in this mountain lake. I mean, we were in the middle of nowhere, and there was this lake. We were fishing for Arctic char, but there was some huge pike in there, and I mean, if you just put your fingers out of the boat and just splash the water a little bit, they'd come up. I mean, I took my clippers off and just put it in the water, and they would hit the clippers. Yeah. And so you would think tiger muskie would be like that. Nope. No. Really fascinating fish. Oh, and speaking of fascinating, in Montana, discover a land where adventure roams free. Explore small towns where every corner tells a story and every greeting comes with a smile. Saddle up for breathtaking horseback rides or catch a fish in a crystal clear lake. Spend your evening sharing stories around a campfire under a starlit sky. That's how you Montana. Plan your trip at visitmt.com. That's visitmt.com. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. And you also just heard me talk a little bit about the Visit Montana website, and that want to thank the state of Montana and that for being part of our program too. Check out that website. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is I had done a podcast a while back with a guide who uses the Live Scope. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Live Scope and that.
Yeah.
And he uses that, of course, to fish, but he uses it as a teaching tool. And so people, clients, especially clients that aren't real familiar with fishing, he can really show them, because they can watch when they're jigging, of what to do to how to stimulate that fish in that. What are your thoughts as a fisheries biologist about some of this new technology and fishing? What do you think that's there's two different sides. Like some people just hate that it's being used in tournaments because the really good fishermen are even better now and all that. Where do you fall on all that stuff?
My deal is I don't have a problem with people using the new technology, and the reason I say that is because we monitor fish populations, and we being the state agencies, and if we were to see a population level effect, then we could do something. But I think it's highly unlikely that there will be a population level effect from some of this technology. And I think they published it. Some biologists in Kansas were worried about the use of live scope for crappies, and they found that it didn't make any difference. And so I don't have a problem with it. I mean, technology comes and goes, and I think in the most part, we have such a good handle on the fish populations. And if we were to see something, we could put on some kind of harvest regulation or something like that. Still allow people to use the technology, but we might limit, the amount of harvest or something like that. But I think if people want to do it, and especially in a case like this where people are like, wow, check out that fish, and they're getting more excited about fish, more power to them, right?
Yeah. That's what I like about it. And we have fish limits, so you hit your limit, you're done.
Exactly.
But I never had thought about using it as a teaching tool, and it was just fascinating. And in fact, he's got some videos, and you can go watch and listen to him how he's teaching these people to fish, and they get so excited because they can see the fish come up, and it teaches them a lot. So it's pretty fascinating to watch.
We use some of that technology in our research. We're trying to, for example, we have a project on paddlefish above Fort Peck Reservoir, and we're trying to recapture the paddlefish that we tag to see if they spawned or not. And we'll use a combination of radio telemetry and the live scope to try and recapture those fish. So it's fun. Yeah.
Pretty neat stuff. And it's cool that now the average fisherman can use it too. Well, I want to thank you so much for all the time that you've given us, Chris. And before we go, share with us, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about fish or anything else that swims or grows in the state of Montana in the water?
Yeah. I think probably the most misunderstood are the fish that aren't considered sport fish, or attracted by the angling public, and that are part of generating license dollars and things like that. I mean, you'll circling back to the Fishes of Montana app, you'll scroll through there, and there'll be a lot of species. You're like, wow, I did not know that was here. I did not know that was here. And we have everything from pygmy whitefish, which is a really small whitefish in some of the deep lakes in western Montana, to sand shiners or sicklefin or sturgeon chub that live in the turbid Missouri River. And think about all the adaptations those fish had went through to be in those completely different environments, right? And sicklefin and sturgeon chub, they are living down in that deep foul wag, that middle part of the river where those pallid sturgeon are at. And it's just cool. How do they make a living down there? How do they? Yeah. It's just, so if anything, if people could recognize and throw some love to those small fishes that aren't part of the angling radar, if you will. They're not on, people aren't out going fishing for them, but think about those and how important those are to, just maintaining the quality of water quality in the rivers and the lakes. So the fishes far beyond those that we fish for can thrive and do good. And continue to make Montana this absolutely wonderful place.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are some fascinating little fish out there. I mean, I was out with back when he was still the fisheries biologist for Canyon Ferry and Hauser and Holter, Adam Strainer. And I went out on a net survey with him, and there was a little stone catfish in there.
Yeah.
And never had seen one before. And fascinating little fish.
Yeah, they are very cool.
And so there's a lot of those cool little things out there swimming around that you go, I'll be damned. Well, and, look at the Cisco in Fort Peck. We would not have near the walleye and would not be able to support the king salmon fishery without those Cisco.
Exactly.
So there's some neat stuff out there. Well, anyway, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, and don't be a stranger. Hopefully we can have you on again and talk about it. I'm sure that we're going to get a lot of questions. Now, if people do have questions and would like to ask you some things about what we talked about today, is it all right to put your email address out there for them to chat with you? Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, then in the podcast description, folks, you'll see that down there, that if you want to send Chris an email, just click here and it'll open up your email program and populate his email address right in there, and off you go. You can send him an email and ask him more questions. So thanks again, Chris, very much for coming on the program with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks for promoting the Fishes of Montana app. We think it's a great product. So thank you very much.
It really is. Yeah, I encourage you folks to take a look at that app, get it on your phone, and it'll just be another weapon in your toolbox, and also just a great thing to give you a lot more knowledge. That's the show for today. Thanks again for your emails and all that. Be sure to check out that podcast description, click on the links, and learn some more about the app and everything else. And until then, folks, be good to each other, have fun, and be safe, and we'll see you next time here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.